sound of drums once meant celebration in the land of Zeriko. Their rhythmic beat would fill the air during harvest festivals, weddings, and the naming ceremonies of new children. The drums were the heartbeat of a thriving people, a sign of life and joy. But now, when the drums thundered from the governor's palace, they meant only one thing: death. For the enslaved people of Ebony, living in the shadow of the great palace, the sound was a cold, chilling signal. The drums were the announcement that soldiers were coming, not to wage war, but to commit an act of unimaginable cruelty. Their purpose was to take away the newborn sons of the Ebony. "Let no male child of the Ebony live," the governor, a man known for his ruthlessness, had ordered, his voice as cold as stone. "If they grow too many, they will rise against us." The edict was a chilling decree, a final act of oppression designed to break the spirit of the Ebony people for all time. On that night, in a small mud hut lit only by a weak flame, a young woman named Naomi clutched her infant son to her chest. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm that mimicked the drums outside. She had already seen soldiers drag away the babies of her neighbors, their mothers' screams swallowed by the night. She knew they would soon come for hers. The fear was a living thing inside her, a terror so profound it made her body ache. Her baby, her beautiful, innocent Adissa, was too perfect to lose. Naomi wept as she worked, her tears splashing onto her hands as she weaved a basket from reeds. The reeds, once used to hold the harvest, were now her last, desperate hope. She wove with a speed born of a mother's fear, her fingers nimble despite their trembling. The basket was her final act of defiance. She lined it with torn pieces of her favorite dress, a dress she had received from her mother, a dress that was the last reminder of a life she no longer had. The cloth was soft against her child's skin. She looked at her baby boy, his small face peaceful and innocent in the dim light. She kissed his forehead, his tiny nose, and his soft cheeks. Her lips brushed against his skin, and she whispered his name, Adissa, a name meaning the one who makes himself clear, a name she had chosen with so much hope and love. "Live, my son," she whispered through her tears. "Live and become greater than those who enslave us. May your path be clear, and may your voice be heard." With trembling hands, she placed him inside the basket. The small weight of his body felt immense, a heavy price for a mother's sacrifice. She wrapped him in a blanket, hiding him from the cold night, from the ruthless world that wanted to destroy him. Then, under the cover of darkness, she stole out of her hut and set the basket upon the river that flowed past the village. The river was now her only chance. The water was fast and cold, but she had to trust it. The basket drifted into the current, swallowed by the darkness. Naomi stood on the bank, a hand over her mouth to stop a sob from escaping, watching as her entire world floated away. The river tossed and turned the fragile basket. Waves splashed against it, threatening to sink it. The flimsy reed boat was no match for the river's might, but a mother's hope was a powerful force. The cries of Adissa pierced the night, his small voice echoing across the banks. His cries were heard by villagers hiding in the shadows, their faces etched with fear and sadness. They saw the basket but dared not reach for it, for fear of the governor's soldiers who patrolled the banks. To be caught helping an ebony child was an instant sentence of death for their entire family. The people of Ebony had been so completely broken by the cruelty of Governor Dagon that they were now afraid of a drowning child. As the night wore on, the basket faced its greatest challenge. The river narrowed, forming a rough, rocky passage. The basket was tossed and spun, a small toy in the hands of a furious giant. Adissa's cries became louder, more desperate. The basket was hit by a log that had been swept away by the current. It spun violently, its contents threatening to spill. For a terrifying moment, it seemed as if the basket would be smashed against the rocks. But by some miracle, it slid past the obstacles, continuing its journey. As dawn broke, a soft golden light illuminated the riverbank. The basket was no longer in the wild, untamed river but in a calm, peaceful channel. It had been carried by the current into the most unexpected of places, the palace gardens of Governor Dagon, the cruel ruler who had ordered the slaughter. There, by chance, the governor's wife, Selena, was swimming with her attendants. Do you think Selena will see the basket and help Odessa? What will happen when she discovers his identity? Pause this video and let us know in the comments, and take this time to subscribe to our channel. The sun was just beginning to climb, casting a soft, golden light over the meticulously manicured palace gardens. The air was fresh and cool, a stark contrast to the oppressive heat of the day to come. Governor Dagon's wife, Selena, was enjoying her morning ritual of bathing in the palace's private channel, a serene offshoot of the great river. Attendants stood by, ready to serve her, their whispers a gentle murmur in the quiet morning. But today, their tranquil peace was broken by a sound that did not belong, a faint, mournful cry. It was the sound of a baby. Selena, a woman of deep sorrow, had a heart that had been broken by her inability to have a child. She had longed for a son, a living legacy for her husband, but no child had come. The cries of a baby, any baby, were a painful reminder of her deepest unfulfilled desire. She gestured to her attendants, her voice a sharp whisper, "Find the source of that sound. I must know what it is." The attendants, their faces etched with fear, looked at each other. They knew the governor's decree. They knew that the sounds of an ebony child were a call for the soldiers, a call for an even greater tragedy. They were afraid to get involved. But Selena's word was a command. They reluctantly began to search the riverbank, their movements slow and full of dread. As the attendants searched, the small reed basket, now illuminated by the rising sun, drifted into the channel right next to Selena. It was a simple, unassuming thing, a small boat on a great river, a tiny life floating amidst a world of power and cruelty. Selena saw the basket first. The cries were louder now, more urgent. With a grace that defied her position, she reached out and pulled the basket to the shore. Her attendants gasped, horrified by her actions, but she ignored them. Her eyes were fixed on the basket. It was a crude, homemade thing, a basket made from a mother's tears and desperate prayers. A mother's hope was all that it was. With trembling hands, she reached in and pulled back the cloth. The sight that met her eyes made her heart ache. It was a small, beautiful baby boy, his eyes wide and filled with tears. He was cold, shivering, and hungry, but he was alive. His cries, once so full of pain, now seemed to be a call for help, a call that was answered by a powerful woman who had all the power in the world to help him. The attendants were shocked. One of them, a woman named Lida, a brave woman who had seen the soldiers drag away the babies of her own people, spoke up. "My lady," she said, her voice a low whisper, "this is an ebony child. You must not touch him. You must not keep him. The governor has issued a decree. If he finds out, he will have you killed." Selena looked at the child, then at Lida. Her face, usually so composed, was now a mask of profound emotion. She did not answer. Instead, she took the baby in her arms and held him to her chest. His body was so small, so fragile. She felt the warmth of his small hands, the softness of his skin, and a wave of pure, unadulterated love washed over her. She had a son now. A son. Selena, a woman who had spent her life under the shadow of her husband's cruelty, had found a son in the place where her husband's cruelty was most evident. Her love for the child was fierce and immediate. It was a love that was born not out of hope, but out of a shared experience of deep pain. She had longed for a child. This child had been rejected by the world. It was a perfect match, a perfect love. She looked at her attendants, her eyes now filled with a defiance they had never seen. "This child," she said, her voice a low, fierce whisper, "is a gift from the gods. His cries have found my ears. His fate is now intertwined with mine. I will not turn my back on him. He will be my son." Her attendants, terrified but loyal, were forced to obey her. They helped her get the child clean and warm. They found milk for him. They dressed him in new clothes. He was no longer an ebony child, he was the son of the governor's wife. But a question lingered in the air, a question that was too dangerous to ask. How would she hide the child from her husband, a man who had ordered the slaughter of all male ebony children? A desperate plan was hatched. They would hide the child in a secret room, a hidden chamber that only Selena and her most trusted attendants knew about. They would tell the governor that the basket had been swept away by a storm and that the baby had drowned. It was a risky plan, a plan that could cost them all their lives. But Selena was a mother now. She would not let a child be killed, not by her husband, not by anyone. Adissa grew up in the hidden chambers of the palace. He was a secret, a shadow living in the heart of the enemy's home. Selena raised him with all the care and love she could. She taught him to read, using ancient scrolls she found in her husband's library. She taught him the arts of battle, using a wooden sword she had carved for him, and she taught him the arts of leadership, using the stories of great kings and queens she found in her books. He was a natural student, a quick learner, and a brilliant young man. He was taught to be a prince, a future ruler, but his heart was restless. Though raised among the rulers, he felt an emptiness, a sense of not belonging that he couldn't explain. He would often sneak out of his chambers and watch the other children play, but he could not join them. He was a ghost, a boy who existed but who was not seen. His greatest joy was watching the ebony slaves who worked in the palace. He would watch them from a hidden window, their faces tired but their spirits unbroken. He saw them sing songs of a homeland he had never known, and he felt a strange, inexplicable connection to them. He would often sneak them food, and he would watch them with a deep sense of respect. He was surrounded by opulence, but he felt an emptiness, a void that could only be filled by a sense of belonging he could not find in the palace walls. One day, during a great festival in the palace, Adissa, now a young man, was walking through the servants' quarters. The drums were thundering, but this time they were a sound of celebration. People were dancing, singing, and feasting. But as he walked past a small group of ebony slaves, he overheard them whispering. "That is Naomi's son," one old woman said, her voice a low whisper. "The child who was lost to the river." Adissa's heart froze. His mind reeled. He had never heard the name Naomi. He had never heard the story of a lost child. He had been taught that his mother, Selena, was a powerful, beautiful woman who had chosen him from the beginning. The words of the old woman, a woman he had seen many times in the palace, hit him like a physical blow. The feeling of not belonging now had a name. He waited for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest. He saw another old woman, her face filled with deep, profound sadness. She was a woman who worked in the palace gardens, a woman he had seen many times, a woman with a gentle, kind face. He walked up to her, his voice a low whisper. "Are you Naomi?" he asked. The woman's eyes widened in shock. She looked at him, her face filled with tears. She nodded, her voice a broken whisper. "Yes," she said. "I am Naomi." Odessa, now a man, did not ask her to come with him. He did not ask her to tell him the story. He already knew. He was a son of the enslaved, not a son of the rulers. The woman who had sacrificed everything for him was standing right there, a slave in the place where he lived like a prince. He went to his mother, Selena. He did not yell. He did not scream. He simply stood there, his face a mask of pain and betrayal. "Am I your son?" he asked, his voice a low whisper. Selena's eyes filled with tears. She had known this day would come. She had prayed it would never come. She reached out to him, but he pulled back. He looked at her with a profound sense of sorrow. "Why?" he asked. "Why did you lie to me?" Selena wept. "I did it to save your life," she said. "Your father, Governor Dagon, had ordered the killing of all male ebony children. I did it because I had no children. I did it because I loved you." Odessa looked at her. He saw her pain, her love, her sacrifice. But he also saw the years of lies. He saw the years of pretending. He felt a deep sense of sorrow, a deep sense of betrayal. He looked at her and said, "You are not my mother. You are my captor. I am not the son of a ruler. I am the son of the enslaved. I am Ebony." Do you think Odessa will forgive Selena? How will he find his way in this new world he has discovered? Let us know in the comments and be sure to subscribe to our channel. The world shattered for Odessa, but in that shattering, a new reality came into focus with a shocking clarity. The opulent palace, once a symbol of his identity, now felt like a gilded prison. The luxurious clothes and fine food were no longer comforts, but reminders of the injustice his people suffered. His heart, which had always felt a deep, unnameable emptiness, now had a name. It was the void left by his stolen heritage. He confronted Selena, the woman he had always known as mother, but his pain was not a simple anger. It was a deep, sorrowful ache of betrayal. He was not the son of a ruler, but the son of the enslaved. Selena, weeping, confessed that every lie had been a choice to save his life, a desperate act of love. But Odessa could not yet process this. To him, her love felt like a beautiful cage, and he was ready to break free. Odessa's world was now divided. By day, he played the part of Governor Dagon's son, studying leadership and strategy in the palace, a part he was a master at. But by night, he returned to the world he had rediscovered. He found Naomi, his birth mother, working in the palace's vast kitchens. She was no longer a young woman, but her eyes held a depth of wisdom that came from a lifetime of suffering and perseverance. In secret, she told him stories of the ebony, their history, their songs, their culture, and their quiet resistance. She spoke of the men who had been dragged away, of the women who cried in silence, and of the unyielding spirit of a people who were enslaved but not broken. The more he learned, the more the void in his heart was filled with a sense of purpose. He was not born to sit in comfort while his people suffered. He was born to lead. Every lesson in strategy, every lesson in leadership, now had a new meaning. He was not preparing to rule Zurico, he was preparing to liberate it. He used his knowledge of the palace's inner workings to help the ebony. He would leave food in secret passages, smuggle out medicine for the sick, and pass on information about the governor's troop movements. He became a ghost, a shadow in the halls, but this time, he was not invisible. He was a silent whisper of hope. The word of his actions spread like wildfire through the ebony community. The slaves saw him not as the governor's son, but as a silent ally, a man who risked everything for them. He became a symbol of their quiet resistance, and they began to refer to him in whispers as the one who makes himself clear, a reference to his name, Adissa. Governor Dagon, a man whose heart was as cold as stone, fell gravely ill. His body, once so strong, was now weak and frail. The drums, which had once announced death, now signaled his own slow demise. As his final moments drew near, the palace was thrown into chaos. The council, a group of self-serving officials who had grown rich on the governor's tyranny, began to squabble over who would rule next. They were so consumed by their greed that they failed to see the quiet storm that was brewing outside the palace walls. The news of the governor's death was met with a stunned silence. For the Ebony, it was a moment of profound significance. They had endured decades of oppression, and now, their tormentor was gone. The time for action was now. The people, who had been secretly gathering and preparing, rose as one. The drumbeats, once a signal of terror, now became a call to arms. They marched on the palace, their voices a single, powerful song of freedom. The palace guards, used to crushing resistance, were shocked. This was not a riot, it was a revolution. And leading the charge, not as a soldier but as a beacon of hope, was the young man they had always known as the governor's son. Adissa stepped forward, his face a mask of quiet resolve. He was no longer the boy who was rescued from the river, he was the man who was born for this moment. The council members, seeing Adissa, were enraged. They screamed at him, calling him a traitor, but their voices were drowned out by the roar of the Ebony people. They declared him their true king. The boy once abandoned in a river now stood before the palace, his face filled with a sense of profound purpose. The guards, seeing that the people were led by the one they had known as their prince, laid down their arms. The takeover was peaceful, but it was absolute. Adissa, the child of the river, now stood before the throne. But he did not sit on it. He walked to the great bronze doors of the palace, the doors that had been closed to the Ebony for decades. He looked at his people, their faces filled with a mixture of fear and hope. He raised his hands and spoke, his voice clear and resonant, a voice filled with the wisdom of both worlds. "No longer slaves," he said, his voice echoing across the courtyard. "From this day forward, you are a people of honor." With that, he pushed the gates open. The Ebony people, once a people of shadows, now walked into the light. He abolished the enslavement decree, gave them homes, fields, and the freedom to be who they were. He did not rule for himself. He ruled for them. And in doing so, he became the king who turned slaves into a nation. The river that once carried him away from a cruel life had carried him to a position of leadership. The small basket that had once saved him now symbolized the journey of a man who found his purpose in the heart of his people. Adissa, the son of Naomi, the child of the river, became the king who not only freed his people but also gave them a future. Do you have a favorite part of the story? Tell us what it is in the comments. Also, tell us where you're from and if you followed this story to the end. Until we see you in our next story. Stay well.